a lot of the difficulties that arise in meditation because we have habituated responses. It's as if there's a stimulus and then a response. For example, I used to work a lot with people who had intense skin disorders. And if somebody has bad eczema, the nerve endings are very stimulated by the disruptions in the skin. And there's an enormous urge to scratch because we see a basic correlation or necessary connection between itch and scratch. If you feel an itch, you want to scratch it. It's just automatic. But if you've got bad eczema and you scratch, you irritate the nerve endings more, and so you get into a terrible cycle where you can tear your skin and it's bleeding and so on. So we would look at this sense of itch means scratch. And if you can come to see that itch means itch, you don't need scratch. Itch is a sign that the nerve endings are jumping around and they're tingling. And if they're allowed to subside, they will subside. And if you scratch them, they'll get worse. So what they don't need is scratch. But I want to scratch. I feel I need to scratch. Just leave it alone. And this is the real sort of struggle, is in the face of an invitation to arousal, relax. So this is the same in the meditation. Some thought or feeling or whatever arises, and we seem to be being hailed, to being called forth to get involved, to respond, to do something. But it's not necessary. You can just leave it alone. And when the subject or the responder, the scratcher, becomes non-active or quiescent, the stimulating object gradually goes down. It's a bit the same if you have an addiction to cigarettes or alcohol. It is as if the presence of a cigarette is calling, smoke me. And the alcohol is saying, drink me. A bottle of whiskey doesn't say anything at all. But we hear it calling. So the more you can just see the bottle is a bottle, I am the one who am projecting this magical voice into the bottle of whiskey that says, do me a favor and drink me. This is the mind moving. And the less the mind moves, the more the whiskey can just be whiskey. It's just a bottle. There's no necessary correlation between the presence of the whiskey and drinking, the presence of the cigarettes and smoking, the presence of an itch in the skin and scratching, the presence of particular thoughts, patterns, feeling patterns, and so on, and our involvement and reactivity. So at first, when we're new to the practice, it's almost as if we have to sit on our hands and just not respond. The urge is there. But what we start to notice is every time I get involved, I get momentary relief, but chronic vulnerability to more involvement. It's a bit like if you're in school and the bully hits on you and you give them your apple or you give them your pound coin, every day you're going to have to keep giving them. You have to think, I'm not entering into this. This is a game. This is an interactive pulsation. So it's not that the purpose of the practice is to sort of bravely, stubbornly resist the temptation, but that's the positioning you might need to do a little bit at first, because the power of relaxation and openness to just allow these formations to come and go is not fully established. It's not fully present for you, and so the tendency to get lost is going to be there, which again is why the instruction is always if you find yourself being lost, as soon as you're aware of it, very gently return to the practice, whether it's observing the breath or reciting a mantra or relaxing in open awareness. Blaming yourself doesn't help. Returning to the practice is how we maintain the continuity of our focus. So what I'm saying just now is getting lost is part of the path. If you try to block getting lost, you're likely to be hyper-aroused and over-focused, and that can be sustained for a short period of time, but then it vanishes. And it's also not very pleasant, and it makes everything all about duty and struggle, which is a very dualistic formulation. What we're wanting to do is to collaborate with the actual, with the intrinsic quality of our own mind, so that we can relax into being held. Some of you may have done trust exercises where you have to stand on a chair and fall backwards and with your eyes closed and trust that people will catch you and hold you. And that it does involve quite a bit of trust. And so there's the question of faith or belief in the Dharma. The reason we spend quite a lot of time looking at the view or the vision of Dharma is to establish some confidence in our own Buddha nature, no matter how weird our own thoughts are, whether we've had crazy lives and whether we're full of contradictions. That's just the furniture or the clothing. If we can start to trust that the mind itself is open and spacious, then we really can relax into it. As the text in Tibetan, they say that the mother and child have to meet. The mother is the givenness of our awareness, that it's been there from the very beginning. And not only is this awareness there, but this awareness has given rise to the patterns which we find ourselves locked in. All our disturbances, all our confusions, all our self-hatreds and knottedness and all the rest of it, actually, this is the movement of the mind. So, what we take to be ourselves is, if you like, a child formation. We are the offspring of awareness. And because we are cut off from the mother, from the ground, we're like abandoned children. And so we cobble together our lives. We make a kind of DIY version of it because we don't quite know what to do. And that's all our fates in growing up. You see what other teenagers are doing and you try and copy them, and then it doesn't feel right because actually we don't know how to live. There is no right way to live. So there's always an anxiety, am I doing it right? And who can I rely on? Our own flesh and blood, mothers and fathers and friends and family, they give us advice or opinions or judgments from their positionings. But their positionings are also fixed relative positionings. Everybody just gives you the view from here, from wherever they're located, but they're not speaking from the open ground of being. So, when the text is saying that the mother and child should meet, it's that we as this energy formation, swirling so fast that we create the illusion of being a self-existing phenomena, we start to trust my existence or me being me is actually the flow of my becoming, which is interactive and is arising as moments of experience illuminated by my awareness. The experience is the child of the awareness. Without awareness, we wouldn't have this flow of manifesting experiences. The child and the mother are inseparable. The mirror and the reflection are inseparable. The mirror is the ground and the giver, if you like, the facilitator of the arising of the reflection. The mind itself gives rise to all our experiences. So even when we feel lost and tangled and confused, we're actually where we ought to be. We are at home, because there has never been any fundamental separation between the ground and the effulgence of the ground. That is what's called ignorance in Buddhism. If you ignore the ground, then you become this bereft orphan. You become homeless. You're a waif and a stray. You're wandering without protection. And of course, under these circumstances, you cleave to, you hang on to whatever sustenance you can get. And some people become workaholics, some people devote themselves to bodybuilding, some people take paths of self-destruction. We're all trying to work out, who am I? How should I be? What should I do? What's the right way? Because this is the groundlessness of our being means everything's open. You have a potential to become, but what you can never become is an entity, a self-existing phenomena, which is truly knowable. The idea of self-knowledge, when that refers to knowing who you are as a person, is bamboozling and bewildering. Because once you start to observe your mind, it's because it's always changing and you have no fixed content, you can't know who you are. What you can do is relax into awareness, which is the mother or the ground of all the things that you become. So the confusion that says, the ego identity is my true being, this is my true identity, who I really am, is relaxed and resolved into, these are the patterns of my emergence, my becoming, which arise from my interactions with others. And this is all the fruit or the fruition or the fecundity of the ground itself. Now, we might need to wonder, well, why do so many bad things arise? In the tradition it says there is one ground and two paths. The open awareness of the mind itself gives rise to every possibility. One path is the emergent formation, while enjoying the movement of the patternings of this energy, is aware of its own ground. Like a dancer being aware of the stage and movement, and so this energy is able to move with the other dancers. But sometimes, if you're at a party, you get people who are maybe slightly intoxicated, and they're dancing with their eyes closed, and they're just whacking their arms all over the place. Whoa! So that's usually how the ego ends up, just self-absorbed but flowing around. When you have a sense of the space that you're moving in, the space enters into a conversation with your movements. So you can start to be genuinely connective with other people, and this is not a limitation or a constraint, but it's actually quite supportive. Dancing with someone else brings you into an extended range of movements. But it's in a context, it's on the ground. We have the floor beneath us, we have the stage. So when you recognize the ground, you see that this movement arises as a flow of experience. When you have the other path is you have the emergence, but it arises with a forgetfulness of the ground, so that, well, I'm just me. You know, of course I've got parents, but anyway, I'm just me. So even on a biological basis, we sort of cut off the line of dependence of our parents and we become just ourselves. You see that if you hang out with small children, that they are both themselves, they're highly dependent, particularly on the mother, but at the same time they're asserting their autonomy because they don't want to be an extension of the mother. And of course, children have to be separating from the mother, and that's part of our survival as social creatures. But when we separate from the ground, and the ground is not a historical function, it's not that you come, as you come out of your mother's womb and the umbilical cord is cut, you then start your, as it were, separated identity, and you gain more and more autonomy. The ground of our being is not something historical. It's not something that was present a long time ago, but we lost it and we've wandered away from it. It's not like the Garden of Eden or some kind of myth of creation. It is now. Awareness is now, because everything arises as the revelation of movement in the field of awareness. So we haven't left the mother. The mother and child are always together. And yesterday we looked at this traditional saying that the mind is unborn and unceasing. Unborn means the child never comes out of the mother. Or in the symbolic language that's very popular in Indian Buddhism, we're all within the womb of the Great Mother. The womb of the Great Mother is emptiness itself. So everything is inside emptiness. It doesn't come out of it. And yet, it is unceasing. The display of patterns, of forms, of sounds, all the objects in the world are the emergence of emptiness. You have form and emptiness, sound and emptiness, memory and emptiness, like and emptiness, dislike and emptiness. Everything is with the mother. When we see that, no matter how you move, no matter, as it were, how far you go, you're always at home. The ground of your being is present with the emergence, so there's no contradiction. But it's when we have forgetfulness of our ground, then there's just me. I, me, myself. And then we've got to work out what to do. And then it feels it's all up to me. So hopefully from this you can see why the practice functions the way it is. It's quite a simple practice. It's not complicated. But it's about, by non-interfering and non-correcting the flow of experience, we come to see that the experience is a luminous display devoid of essence and substance, which is inseparable from the ground. And so life goes on. Everything we do can be just the same. You don't have to change any of your behaviors, but it's seeing that this is an emergent and dissolving moment, an emergent and dissolving moment. When that infinity and stability of the ground open emptiness and the transience of the emergent moment, when they are seemingly cut asunder and you lose the ground, then you've got just one damn thing after another. When's it all going to stop? It's all too much. And that's where we come into sorting it out, because we have to impose patterns and make meanings and make sense of things. And then we want to insert rules and regulations, and we start over-privileging the earth element. So, although the practice is quite simple, it's very close to the original teachings of the Buddha Samantabhadra. So, what is attachment? We have outer forms of attachment, so I can say, this is my watch, it's not your watch, don't take it because it's mine. So that's a subject, object, and the verb is ownership. I own this watch. We also get attached to patterns of behavior. familiar ways of doing things, whether that's getting up early to get the kids to school, or having the rhythms of the workplace, having a particular desk that you work from. One of the great causes of anxieties in many NHS departments has been the development of hot desking, where people go off and see a patient, and when they come back, they don't know where they're going to sit, and they're required to fill in all the details on the computer, but they can't get access to a computer. What the hell is this? Because the idea, this is where I work, so I can go out and do my engagement, and then I come back. But every time you come back now, you don't know where you're going. So this brings a lot of anxiety, because surely I should have a stable place to work. That helps me to stay sane in this world of movement. And there we can see it's, in a sense, attachment to rhythms. And we know that with children, if you feed them regularly and they get used to having a bath at a particular time, the rhythm of the day helps them to settle. So we are quite rhythmic creatures. So the identification with rhythm and pattern gives a sense of security. And that's the more subtle form of attachment. And then, of course, we have attachment to the functions of our identity, to our memories of what we seem to have done in the past, our plans about the future, and so on. By merging into these mental formations or formations of images, representations of past moments and future moments, we hold on to something as being a kind of reflection of ourselves. By being able to remember where I was last week, I confirm that I am now. So both the past and the future, almost like a kind of sonar thing in a ship, sending out little pulsations and vibrations to test the depth. When we move into our memories and plans for the future, we're sort of palpating representations and ideas which send back vibrations, securing our sense of who we are. This is where I grew up, this is my favorite food when I was a kid, and so on. And that creates a kind of vibration which we take as a simulacrum of a stable identity. So we're hanging on to ephemera, and by a mental trick, we're turning the ephemera into something substantial and secure. You say to a child, "What age are you?" "I'm 4.5. And the half is really important, because I'm not just 4, I'm a big 4. What is 4.5? You can hardly count. You don't know what 4.5 is, but you see the child wants to have definite knowledge about themselves. They want to be able to propose themselves, to present themselves as a proposition. I am self-defining. Because, and this is our problem, either I define me or you define me. And if you define me, I'm a little bit in threat. So all the consciousness-raising movements in the last century, feminist, racial equality, and so on, have centered around the issue, nobody who is not like me can tell me who I am. Each person must have their voice. Freedom means self-definition. And on one level, of course, it does. It's a terrible thing to have other people define the limits of your possibility. But now if I'm defining the limits of my possibility, in order to have a shape, I have to define myself. So the basis of my freedom is my limitation. Doesn't sound quite right, does it? It's only by knowing who I am that I can know what I want to do with my life. It's my life. I'm going to live my life on my terms. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. But of course, people tell us what to do all the time. And actually, we don't really know what to do with our lives. So this self-assertion is a sort of sad, plaintive cry. And many people spend their whole lives not having moved much beyond that sort of teenage position. Because actually, what will I do with my life? As St. Francis said, make me an instrument of thy will. That's quite nice. If you think that God speaks to you and God has some intention or purpose for you, it creates a kind of wind or a hand in your back that keeps you vertical and gives you a sense of direction. If it's all up to me, and I have a mind that's full of vagaries and whimsicality, and all sorts of things can suddenly take my fancy, I'm all out to sea without a paddle. I haven't really a clue what's going on. So there you could see our desire to give ourselves to something. People give themselves to golf, to religions, to political parties, to liberation struggles, because they give a sense of direction and purpose and shaping. And then life is over. And who was I? I was a lifelong member of the Communist Party. Used to be very big and popular, now it's almost vanished, but it was an identity. And so many identities that people adopt, they're like piggy number one. It's a straw house. It's just a straw house. So what is a reliable dwelling? This is awareness. So there's the ground and the manifestation. The task is to see that the ground and its manifestation are always integrated. They have never really been separated, and that ignorance and delusion are the fantasy that I am an autonomous subject, a free agent, an actor determining my own fate. We have neither mastery nor are we servants, but energy manifests in collaboration with the potential of the field. So ignorance is not a state. Often in Buddhist texts you read that everything arises from ignorance and attachment. But it's not that there's a state of clarity and a state of ignorance. Ignorance is a performativity. Ignorance is ignoring. Because if the ground is here always, it is the very basis of our being alive, being present, and I don't get it, I'm not seeing it. It's there, but I don't see it. Now, in this room, there are many features of it that we probably haven't paid much attention to since we came into the room. They didn't hook our attention. Some things we may have looked at quite a lot. You might be interested in the sound system or the lighting or image of Padmasambhava, whatever. So we live with selective attention, as we looked before at this foreground, background, the figure and ground. And the more you fixate on one particular aspect, the rest goes into the background. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's always there. Everything that's in this room has been in this room, but unwelcomed, unseen. And so instead of having an open panoramic vision, an inclusive vision, we've been operating under a selective vision. And it's this selectivity which engages us into highlighting some features and ignoring other features. And this is exactly what happens in terms of awareness. If your attention is focused on movement, you don't see the stillness. You just see the movement. If you went to a sports competition and you were watching the 100 meters, what you see is a bunch of people suddenly starting to run very fast and your eyes tracking how they're running. And then the running ends. They were running on grass or on cinders. That was not very important. You were looking at the runners. Same as if you watch a football match, it's played on a pitch. Without the pitch, you wouldn't have the football match. But most people are not particularly interested in looking whether the grass is more developed in one part of the green than the other. That's something for the referee to check at the beginning of the match and have a word with the groundsman. The grass, the ground, is invisible because we're looking at the movement of the football players. Without the grass, no game. But the game is the movement of the football players. It's not a very difficult notion, and that's what we do all the time. We are caught up in the movement of the senses, what we hear, see, what we touch and feel with our bodies and so on, with our thoughts, memories and so on. These are like the movement of players on the football pitch. Well, where's the pitch? The movement couldn't be happening without the spacious awareness. It's taken for granted. And so all we're doing in the practice is relaxing into the basis of the movement so that we start to see the game and the ground, the running and the stillness of the track, and that they have always been there together. It's not that the ground vanished. It's not that we've lost the basis of our existence, and so we have to go on this hellish spiritual journey to find somewhere over the mountains in the next valley. The illusion of a spiritual journey is toxic. In terms of Dzogchen, in terms of other practices, it's very valid, and I humbly support all those who engage in that. But for our purposes, it's a dead end, because what it means is jam tomorrow. One day it will be better. How will it be better? Because I will have evolved. I will be more able to manage my emotions. I will be able to... This is the journey of the ego. This is the journey of interior designers. This is getting better furniture and a cleaner carpet. Our issue is not about the qualities of our personality. It is about the relationship between what arises and where it comes from. The awareness is the ground or the site. And of course, it's not a two-dimensional arena. It's a multi-dimension. The ground awareness is not located underneath our experience. It's not located somehow behind us, showing everything that's in front. The mind is ungraspable. It's an awareness which is always present but cannot be caught. And within this, everything is moving. If everything is moving, the good is moving and the bad is moving. The kind and the cruel are moving. The helpful and the selfish are moving. All is movements of the ground. The paradox is, instead of having to try to be a better person, which involves you in rectification, correction of your particular patterns, once you see the ground, once you relax in the openness of being present, what would be the motivation for causing harm? Probably if we reflect on our own lives, the times that we've been really shitty and have hurt other people is times that we've got wrapped in some position in ourselves. We have become small, and out of that small denseness, we've, stabbed someone or denied them or cheated on them or done something unhelpful. Being small is the dangerous thing. When you're relaxed in this open awareness and you have access to everything, everything's arising, you don't need so much. Most of us have too much stuff. We don't need it. Because possession often gets in the way of enjoyment. Whereas the enjoyment of life is to be with whatever it is in the fleeting moment. I may have mentioned this before when I've been here. One time when I came back from India, it was in the summertime, and I went with a friend in New Bond Street because we'd got some jewellery in India we're trying to sell. There was a ethnic jewellery shop there. Walking down New Bond Street, there's lots of jeweller shops, and the sun was shining, and we stopped and we looked in this window, and it was full of diamond rings, sunlight shining, and all the diamonds are sparkling. And so for about 10 minutes, we were drinking diamonds through our eyes. And I had a full diamond experience. And then you walk on in your little flip-flop sandals without much money in your pocket, but you got diamond. And I think if I had a diamond, I'd be sort of wondering if I'm going to lose it or forget it or someone will steal it. So in that way, the full enjoyment came from the non-possession. And so with many things in life, by hanging on to things, we lose them. Whereas by offering ourselves into the world, we find that there are infinite richness of multiple experiences. So what this would suggest is that ethics is not grounded in effort, but ethics is grounded in being open to the field. Because if we really experience that I am my experience and you are my experience, then we're arising together as the play of the mind. So why would I harm you? You're not other than me. You're not alien to me. Neither are we the same. We're neither the same nor different. But you have your unique particularity. You have your unique particularity, as do I. And so our issue is how to collaborate and to share the space and be communing with each other. Not dominating, not dominated, but space for everyone to move at ease with what's going on. And I would suggest that's the basis of ethics, because it means I have to see your face. I can't assume things about you. So my private mental thoughts, instead of supporting me in working out what to do with you, I now start to see as an impediment, as a veil that exists between me and you, and that if I want to relate to you, I have to open to you. I have to have a sense of you as you are in this moment, and something will come. So I'm trusting the potential of the ground of being as it shows itself as you, and as it will show itself as me. That trusting connection means something will come to mind. We'll find ourselves saying or doing something. So, if you've got a friend whose partner's just died, what will you say? There's nothing to think about. You say something. Now, we're talking always about the middle way. You can't just blah, 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 your own assumptions and habit formations, because that's your stuff that you're projecting. But if you're with the person, something will come to mind or not. So you may find yourself just being silent with them, being calm, or you may say something. But if you're with them, the energetic facticity of their existence will call you into being. So you don't need to sit in this lonely castle inside yourself and try and work it out, because that usually becomes a very big obstacle. This is called trusting the non-duality of ground and appearance. Remember, emptiness and awareness, emptiness and clarity, emptiness and appearance. It's not all up to me. But neither can I just let the show run on, because I'm part of it. So I'm collaboratively participating in a field I don't own. Because ownership brings in the sort of stasis of protection and a kind of limited range of responses. So we deconstruct the ossification that arises from attachment on the basis of access. That by and large, especially in our lucky democratic countries, we have freedom of movement, freedom of response. People dress in very different ways, run their lives in very different ways. If we stay in contact with the world, we'll find ourselves coming into being. So less preparation, more relaxation, and then we find we have more responsiveness. And that the responsiveness is not arising from something we prepared earlier, but it arises from the field. That is to say, because this is our field of experience, we can access many of the resources inside. We can find ourselves reaching out in various ways. And we resource ourselves through the 5 elements. So that when the wind is blowing, we can bring the wind element into ourselves and it loosens us up. When the day is cold and we feel a contraction, we can feel a strengthening of the earth element inside. And in that way, you enter into a friendly communication with whatever is occurring. There are no enemies. When we are sad, we are sad. When we are happy, we are happy. Oh, but you're a Buddhist. I thought you were supposed to be happy all the time. This is the kind of public relations stuff that's getting Buddhism very, very confused. The idea that you can become happy in a world where disasters are happening is disgraceful. You know, a Buddhist monk called the happiest man in the world. I mean, this is shameful. Because if you're alive, you're going to be touched and moved. We're going to feel sad. We're going to feel despairing. We're going to feel hopeless. These are colors on the palette of life. We don't need to paint with them all the time, but if you're trying to protect yourself against despair, you're cutting yourself off from people who feel despair. And if you cut yourself off, they're left in their despair, and so it's more likely that their despair becomes a totalizing, a totally defining feature of their existence, and that's the sort of thing that drives people towards suicide, because they can't find a way out. Whereas if we start to see that despair, hopelessness, meaninglessness are just as much part of life as happiness, playfulness, feelings of camaraderie and inclusion, then we start to see what the potential means. Everything is part of me. Despair and joy. And neither is my true self. There is no such thing as a true self or a core self. All these experiences, it's like a Christmas pudding or a clootie dumpling. You've got lots of raisins and so on dispersed through the mass. There is no central thing to it. It's not like a sort of chocolate bomb where you've got the pastry on the outside and the hot chocolate in the middle. And you've got the hidden and the outer. So we've got an inner self, a secret self, and I don't want you to know what I really feel, because if you knew what I was really like, then you wouldn't like me. So I have to pretend to be this. In that way, the falsification of the socially adaptive persona becomes totally toxic. Rather, when we do the practice, we should try to develop the courage to show ourselves, to be more transparent, to be more translucent, because we are all wandering in a fallen world, and simultaneously we're all wandering in a perfect world. And if you can see the natural integration of fallen and perfect, then your faults and limitations become a basis for communication. But if you're frightened of your faults and limitations and you cover them up, you bring in artifice, you bring in pretense, you bring in a kind of falsification, which of course makes you more self-conscious. Because if you're going to present a story of yourself to someone else, you've got to remember what you've told them. This is the burden of lying. And then you can't just be at ease. The natural spontaneity of co-emergence vanishes. So, we relax, open, and allow the coming and going of phenomena, And then if you're practicing at home, when your time for the practice is finished, because you're sitting with open eyes, you're just relaxed, there's a certain tilt more towards manifestation. So we hope in the practice you're going more tilting from identification with appearances into the open space. Because at first we start with our attachment and involvement and editing of patterns of manifestation. Now we relax and open, so we see that these appearances are all in flow, they're transient. We come to the end of the practice, and then we arise, and we're moving, and we're doing things. And this is movement in space. You make a cup of tea, you look at your watch, you realize you have to run to get to work. One step, another step, in a world, down the street, passing people. This is movement in space. This is the movement of space in space. This is form and emptiness, sensation and emptiness. Everything is precisely exactly as it is, but doesn't arrive anywhere. There's no conclusion. It's pattern after pattern after pattern after pattern. There's always something fresh. There's always this new moment. And so we stay fresh in the freshness, and gradually we slough off these burdens of habitual formation, anxious expectation, desires to control other people, and we move more gently and with more connection in the world with others. And that's a damn good thing. So now we do a last meditation practice. So we do the 3R, and then at the end we dedicate the merit of our study and practice for the benefit of all beings. So our brief time together comes to an end. We find ourselves dispersed and moving in different directions. Some people will have a few people that they might be able to practice with. Others may not have that. In the end, practice is something, this particular kind of practice is something which is so very intimate. It's about relating to the most subtle ways in which we become confused or deluded or abandon ourselves, that probably you have to do most of the practice sitting on your own. But you're never alone, because the ground is always there. You're always in the ground, and the ground is the mother of all things. So our interconnectedness with all beings is there. And it's this understanding which, of course, allowed so many male and female yogis in Tibet to practice for years in isolation, in caves, in tiny houses, because they were not alone. The body is there by itself, but the mind is absolutely inclusive to all beings. And this is our way of proceeding, to integrate everything and everyone into the mandala of our existence. So I wish you good luck with your practice. And I'm very glad to have been invited to come here again. It's always a pleasure to meet with people who wish to do practice. And it's aided by the fact that we have recordings, and the recordings will become available. You can look at the Simply Being website, and you'll find them after some time. And of course, this arises due to the participation of many different people who help in terms of organizing, getting all the tea and stuff ready, organizing the venue, helping to tidy up. So of course, my function arises in relation to these people's functions. Sometimes our function is more visible, which in this case is me, and sometimes our function is more invisible. And this is the pulsation of life, because when I'm waiting on Macclesfield cold railway platform, I'll just be poor wee me. And this is the beauty of our existence, becoming big, becoming small, becoming visible and invisible. And so I say goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Hey! Go.
I've been elected to say a few words on behalf of everyone. We'd just like to thank you for your amazing, it's just been awesome this weekend, and we just want to thank you for your limitless wisdom, your just generosity of teachings. We're just so blessed to have you again, and we're just so glad that you're going to be more free. Hopefully we can have you more.
Yay! Whoa!
I was going to say the NHS losses are gained. So there you go.
Lovely. Thank you very much, India. Hey, bravo, everyone. Bravo.